Alright, so that's rolling.
As people in the gallery, we're asking you to join us in that old country song, Glory, Glory. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my burdens down. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my burdens down, friends don't treat me like they used to. Since I laid my burdens down, friends don't treat me like they used to. Since I laid my burdens down, I feel better, so much better. Since I laid my burdens down, I feel better, so much better. Since I laid my burdens down. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch and enjoyed what has transpired thus far. Welcome to rural ministry in an African American context. This particular session deals with the urban minister in a rural context. We're going to begin starting on this side by asking us to give you your name, your church affiliation, and whether you currently self-identify as urban or rural. Start with you.
Okay, my name is William Howard Smith, and pastor of Friendship and Round Hill gave the churches in Giles County, Tennessee, and rural now.
Okay. All right.
My name is Marsha Watkins, and I attend Lane Tabernacle City Church, and I presently supply in Sturgis, Kentucky, and I consider myself a rural minister.
All right.
I'm Charles Rockwell. I'm retired from the Methodist Conference in Kentucky, but on the pastoral staff of Highland Presbyterian here in Louisville. And I would say everybody identification, but I really grew up in country churches when my dad was a Methodist preacher.
All right.
Very good.
Denise Jones, Pine Grove Assembly Church, Clay City, Kentucky, and it is a rural church.
All right. And what about you?
And I'm pastor.
Are you rural or urban? All right.
Mark Thomas. I'm an MDiv student at the Baptist Seminary in Kentucky and also interim pastor at Disciple Through Christ Church near Georgetown, Kentucky. I identify as rural with strong urban connections.
Okay. All right. Right there. Reverend Barnes.
Reginald Barnes, pastor of Brown Memorial Assembly Church in Louisville, Kentucky, urban.
All right.
I'm Allison Sabler. I'm a second year MDiv student here at Seminary. I would say I'm a beautiful mix of both.
Okay.
Angela Johnson, pastor at Grace Hall Presbyterian here in Louisville, a small town, and we are definitely urban.
All right.
Daniel Jameson, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Mount Airy Baptist Church. Definitely urban.
Okay. Doris.
Doris, I was chaplain, neither, but
I think I would identify more with urban.
All right.
Reverend Hospital, the pastor of St. John United Church, rural.
All right. Awesome.
George County St. John A. Design Church on Masonic Road.
All right.
I'm Violet, and first year Presbyterian. I identify with the
Okay, what church?
Presbyterian.
Okay. And back there.
Randall Weber, Snow County Neighborhood Association President. Seminary is Angela.
Okay.
It's obviously African American majority in the city. See a lot of interesting comparisons with the rural districts.
All right. Dr. Tina, tell us who you are.
Tina Patterson. I'm the senior pastor of Mosaic United Methodist Church, Urban.
Okay. All right. My name is Amariah McIntosh. Currently, I'm the pastor of the Phillips Temple Church in Toledo, Ohio, which is a definite urban center. It's about 50 minutes from Detroit, Michigan, about an hour and 45 minutes from Cleveland. We're at the furthest western end of the state. I am a dual degree graduate of Louisville Seminary. Received my MDiv in 2001 and my DMin in 2014. I was born and raised in New York City. Can't get any more urban than that. Upon leaving college, Indiana University, go Hoosiers, I relocated to Indianapolis, another urban center. When I came here to seminary, and I'm a CME, so I serve at the pleasure of the bishop. That's how y'all describe it in the design church, right? We serve at the pleasure of the bishop. My bishop said, since you're going to go to school in Kentucky, I'm going to assign you to a church in Kentucky. We had churches in Louisville. We had a church in Lexington because that pastor just left. He sent me to Campbellsville, Kentucky. Fanny Chapel, right. Fanny Chapel is a CME church in Campbellsville, Kentucky, named after a woman named Fanny. We don't even know her last name. The reason why they named it in her honor is when they organized and separated from the Baptists, they needed a building to worship in and land to build the church on. And Fanny worked for a white family related to the Hodgins of Hodgenville. This was the Hodgins of Kentucky, of Campbellsville. And she went to her boss and said, my church needs land and money. And they gave it. And so when they got the church built, they named it after Fanny. So that's why it's called Fanny Chapel. But leaving Indianapolis that first Sunday morning with my oldest son in tow, today's his birthday by the way, we left Indianapolis coming down I-65 all the way to the Elizabethtown exit. Got off the Elizabethtown exit and took, I think it's 31W to 210. Yes, and that was before they straightened it out. And 210 was curved, yeah, and you saw the deer crossing signs, and somewhere along the way we actually saw a white guy in a pickup truck with a hound dog in the cab. And the further we drove, my son is like, where did the bishop send you now? But I pulled up finally in front of this building that my former church in Terre Haute, Indiana could fit into. Okay? And met a group of people there who gave me my first introduction of rural ministry. One of the things I learned, as Dr. Pollard said this morning, I found out I learned more from them than I could ever teach them. And so we're here today to talk about that. Primarily, a lot of seminary students, when they graduate from seminary, more than likely, especially in churches where you may be on appointment, your first post-seminary assignment, well, probably your seminary assignment, will be in a rural space. Some will get calls and have their first calls in rural spaces. And what we're here to share with you today is that rural spaces don't equal a negative experience. Okay. You've already heard throughout all the various presentations, and you heard Reverend Sherry Green, to those who heard her preach last night, to share of the joyful experiences of being in the rural spaces. Who was in Reverend Snorton's session before lunch? Okay, all of you. So you heard her talk about finding who the pastor is when you get there, okay? And in every church, be it urban or rural, just rural, I think is just more distinguished. Generally, the one who meets you at the door and says, I'm brother so-and-so, or I'm sister so-and-so, and shows you where everything is, and shows you your office, and everybody looks to when decisions are made. We have a former colleague who has gone home to glory now, Reverend Dr. Lonnie Napier, who pastored in Georgia and then came to Cincinnati and even served as a general officer in our church. And Reverend Napier's experience with the church pastor was this. Every Wednesday, I would go down to his house and we'd sit on the porch swing. And I would share with him what my vision and the plan, and so we would talk about it. And once I could get him to buy in, when we had the church meeting, I never had to fight about, yes, and often as urban ministers, I think we want to try to make our rural spaces replicas of our urban context. And the two just don't ever work. Yeah, they don't mesh. And at first I said questions at the end, but if y'all want to help make this work, go for it. So I learned first and foremost, there is somebody who is in charge, and it's not you. That's right. But in time, they will. You do not become, I learned that lesson my first year there. You do not become the pastor until they say that you're the pastor. Yes. I mean, they know they need spiritual leadership, but that doesn't necessarily make you the pastor. They're great ground to test all the theories you learn in the classroom. Kylie Gray and I were MDiv classmates, and we came in a time that they had a course called IPT. Mr. Brockwell probably remembers that one. It was a class called Introduction to Practical Theology, written by two academic professors who hadn't pastored in a long time. And we would sit in small groups and do these case studies, and Colin and I would look at each other and go, that's not gonna work. Because I learned also that what they tell us here, that your congregations are supposed to do, act, and be, they don't know they're supposed to do that. Huh? They don't know that. Yes. They don't know what the book says. Okay? They don't know what the professors say. They know what they know. Okay? And as Dr. Paula said, all they expect you to do as their pastor is to take care of your pastoral duties. Preach to them. Teach Bible study. Do your hospital visitations and sick visits and communion visits. You've already heard Pastor Gray say, they're ecumenical, whether you like it or not. They're going to the Baptist church's anniversary. They're going to the other Methodist church's special days. When they get married, people don't tend to leave their churches because they got married. Everybody stays pretty much where they are. That's what makes the fellowship work for them. So I used to remember that I had a lot of men in my congregation whose wives belonged to the AME church or one of the several Baptist churches. But when we had a church dinner, all them ladies brought their pans and their dishes, went back to their church for morning service, and they came back to eat with us and stay for the afternoon program. One model I've learned in some areas of ministry is don't try to fix what's not broke. Don't try to fix what's not broke. We've got to recognize in rural ministries, they do studies about church sizes, those small, medium, large churches, or the family churches, and the pastoral-sized churches, and the corporate-sized churches. Even if what you come out of is far larger than what you're going into, a lot of our rural churches would fit the model of family to pastoral-sized churches or small to mid-sized churches. All churches are made up of groups of families. In a rural context, you will probably find a family unit that holds all of the major roles in your congregation. In the Methodist Church, we have stewards. And in other churches, they have deacons or whatever they call them. But you're going to have one family member on the steward board, another family member on the trustee board, another family member will be the president of the choir, another one will be the president of the usher board, another one will be the director of Christian education, and a few more are going to be you won't be able to turn without bumping into a family member. And you won't be able to replace them very easily. Yes. I don't care how ineffective they might be. Huh? Yeah. In Methodist tradition, we say we only get 1 year at a time. But that translates to Reverend so-and-so. Let's see, I'm trying to think of an old man. Reverend Roach. He was the pastor who built the new Fanny Chapel building that they have now. But Reverend Roach put me on the steward board 50 years ago. I don't show up to meetings. I don't come to Sunday school. I don't come to Bible study. I don't pay tithes. I don't pay askings. But I'm still on the board. And if the pastor would attempt to remove that person, the first thing that's going to go not only in the church, but in the community is that pastor did them so wrong. How dare them do that? Yes. And as I said in the plenary, and when they die, they expect the full, yes. That's right. The wake and the funeral and whatever rites that happen. That's right. Everybody got to bring the food, and you better not charge them either. Okay. But rural ministries are a blessing. Okay. They know what they have to do, and they're going to be intentional and deliberate. Reverend Barnes here, he's the chair of our joint board finance. And what I've learned in our church context is we often celebrate pastors for making those apportionments done. But that's misleading, because in a lot of rural spaces, these people have been doing it for years. And it's not really that hard for a pastor to make that financial report and be successful at it, because these people are going to do it no matter who the pastor is. You agree with that, Pastor Lick? Because you used to be an elder too. Yeah. You used to be presiding elder, right? I thought you were presiding elder at one time. No? Okay, I got you mixed up with somebody else. I know who it is, the other guy. But he's in your area. Yes. So, but that's what inevitably happens. They know how to worship God. They may not do it the way the big cities do it. But they do it. When I got to Campbellsville, we had a piano player. Mr. Cinderella Sanders. What's her name? Yes, her mama named her Cinderella. And she was really the most pitiful piano player there was. But I decided that she was who we had. And rather than to try to, and plus she was playing for free, rather than to attempt to replace her with somebody from Campbellsville College, I just encouraged her.
There you go.
And showed patience with her. And I noticed that after being patient with her, and if she messed up, we just kept singing, and eventually I started noticing those false notes got to be less and less. And then one year, the bishop invited our choir, that little country choir, to sing at the big spring convocation being held at Brown Memorial CME Church in Louisville, Kentucky. And the question was, so who's going to play for us? Miss Cinderella's going to play for us. She's our musician. I don't know what happened, but Reggie, when we got to Brown, and she sat down at that big baby grand piano y'all got, and she played that piano like she was playing it all her life, no false notes.
She wasn't home.
She wasn't at home. She had to make a good impression in front of her. But again, I've learned to encourage and not wish for what I don't have, but to be grateful for what I do have and encourage them to do and to be better. They know the Lord. They just want to make sure you do too. Okay? I learned, and I would share it with seminary students here. They don't care whether you use inclusive language or not. Yeah, they don't care about that. And the things that we, as seminary students, learn that we have to know and give back and use in our writings and in our presentations, those don't matter. All they want to know is when trouble hits my household, can you get a prayer through on my behalf? You can use those big theological terms if you want to, but plain is better. Yeah, and that's all they want to know is how well do you represent God in their midst. When you leave that rural context, know that wherever you go, especially in the black church, most of our folk came from the rural spaces. And so some of their thinking, some of their theology, some of their attitudes are still going to be present. Urban and rural, they just labels. We're all God's children. So if you're having a crisis adjusting in a rural setting, maybe share something about what you might be experiencing, because our goal here is to help you do better. You're a rookie supply. You guys, what's going on with you down in Sturgis, Kentucky?
Well, there are 6 members.
Yes.
That 4 usually are there when I'm there. And as it's been said many times today, they could teach me more than I can teach. But they are very responsive and encouraging, and I appreciate them tremendously.
Yes.
I am not their pastor.
Well, yes, you are.
So when I present something pastoral to them, they gather and they make a decision, and then they make a decision.
And they're going to make a decision before you get there.
Yeah, they don't come back to me with the decision, so they relay the decision somewhere else.
Yes.
Directly to the president.
Yes, because it's family. They talk about it, they don't wait. They've already made the plan. By the time the church conference or the church business meeting or the session takes place. Yeah, the meeting after the meeting, yes.
They have the meeting right there.
Yes, but once the meeting is over, the official meeting is over, there's still other meetings that go on. Yes, we all have them. That people who didn't come to the meeting knew what happened in the meeting and they wasn't even there. And knew it within 5 minutes of the meeting ended. What you voted on, how much money you voted to spend, what you planned to do. Yes. And when I was pastor, we didn't have cell phones, but somehow they do.
It's a Barbie.
Yes. Angela.
So you have pastored in an urban context too?
And in the rural, yes.
So you mentioned the giving part, that they're going to do it in the rural context. What have you found in differences between rural and urban in terms of that?
In the urban context, some of y'all help me out, they more depend on the pastor to help give leadership and direction towards it.
Toward the giving?
Towards the giving. My rural spaces, everybody already knew what had to be done. And often did things that in my thinking, like I had a rural congregation where once they gave the financial report, we had a lot of money in the checking account. My thinking was, before they moved that money, they should have gotten the bodies okay to say, we want to take this and move it to the savings account or buy a CD. By the time we got to the next meeting, the officers had already done it. And I said, but y'all didn't ask us if it was okay for you to do it. But that was what they always did. But whatever was needed was already there. We planned in Campbellsville, they planned, not with me, they planned for the 135th church anniversary to recarpet the building and replace the pews. They had already raised the money. Oh, and they just announced, this is what we gonna do. And they did it. The only thing I wanted them to do was consider a different color. But when the other pastor said, it's gonna stay red, it stayed red. But I never had to, some of us in our context, some feel that we have to get up every Sunday and remind folk of what the financial obligations are. In those spaces, we don't have to do that. They already know. And they will do, even if it means they have to go knock on doors. That's one thing I've learned in my time, that church leadership today are not as proactive about getting some things done. Okay? Even if Brother James hasn't been physically to church in 6 months, you're going to find an envelope. Because somebody's going to go get it. Yes. Yes. And if it's missing, okay. Now, one thing they will not do that I noticed, like I found out about a family situation, but I found it out from a previous pastor that had existed several years earlier. But since they didn't bring it up to me, it wasn't any point in destroying the peace by mentioning it to them. There are some family secrets in rural spaces that will remain. Yes. Because if you bring it up, you are no longer the beloved. Yeah, you gotta ask for some discernment to know what to touch and what not to touch, especially in dealing with issues. And even though it's family, and it's one major family, a lot of their family issues outside of the church will get lived out and acted out.
Amen.
Yeah, they don't leave it at the door, and they don't leave it at the house. They bring it to those spaces. And so you've got, again, it's about being pastoral. Was it Maya Angelou's statement that it's not important to them how much you know. What's important to them is how much you care. I was told I had to share this story. When I first got to Campbellsville, Kentucky, they took me to visit a member who was in a nursing home. She was blind, couldn't see. But through her history, she had a negative experience. I guess I was the third woman to pastor this congregation. So a lot of those issues I didn't have to deal with. But they took me to meet her. And when she heard my voice, her response was, "Another woman? The bishop said that's another woman? What happened to the man we had?" And I'm pleased to meet you too. And I asked, "So what do you like?" Because I know she hated the food in the nursing home. So what, if you could have something to eat, what would you like to eat? Well, Lee's famous recipe every Wednesday has a 3-piece special on sale, and I like it with mashed potatoes and gravy and coleslaw. I said, okay, I'm still commuting between Indianapolis and Kentucky. But once I get moved, I'm coming out on Wednesday to bring you at least 3-piece fake. What do you want to drink? I want a Sprite. And when I showed up with it, she said, I heard you say you was going to do it, but I thought you were just talking. I didn't believe you would follow through. And for the rest of the time that I was there, every first Sunday, even though it wasn't on special, I still stopped by Lee's and got her 3-piece chicken dinner with her Sprite and took it to her, gave her communion, gave her her chicken, and told the next pastor who followed me, if you want to get along with her, bring her her chicken dinner. Yes. But, and that's how that changed and how she accepted who I was. We tried to bring her to church for the church anniversary because she was the oldest living female. And she wouldn't listen to us, but interestingly, the nurses and the staff at the nursing home convinced her that they would get her ready so that she could be taken to church. And it was surprising to me that when she got to church, most of the community didn't realize she was still around. Miss Elvie's here? Yes. I thought she was dead. No, she's just been out in the nursing home. Excuse me, remember?
She was so mean about it with it.
That was part of it, but hey. Even mean people, God loves and expects us to love them too. All right. What other adjustments do you think, if you identify as an urban minister, if you get an assignment or get a call to a rural space, what do you think is most important to you when you get there? And vice versa. What if you're in a rural space and you get called to an urban space? What do you do? Denise?
No.
I gotta stay in the zone.
Not only getting to know the members, but the community.
Right.
Reach out to the community leaders and find out what your church can do to help the community. Clay City has a new mayor, and one of his objectives this year, while he's in office, is to figure out how to help the youth at risk, children at risk. So if our church, we reach out to them and we see where we can partner with them to help out in the community, that makes a difference because they see the churches reaching out in the community and doing things for the community. For Thanksgiving, like I said, we don't have 4 active members, but we gave a Thanksgiving basket to a family in the community. Our members don't have a lot, but just being willing to share a little made a difference to a family in the community.
And the other thing we have to be aware of, because in an urban setting, a lot of us are not we may be exposed to things that don't happen in rural spaces. But conversely, in a lot of our rural contexts, especially in states like Kentucky, Tennessee, and even some places in Indiana, there are the remnants of legalized separation of the races that have not always been actively and sufficiently dealt with, okay? You may, in rural spaces coming out of an urban context, witness what you might see as a real plantation type mentality going on, okay? They will still defer in some ways to whites that you may always see happening in an urban setting. And in rural spaces, even black folk know they have to get along and got to have relationships. And this is where that comes into play. Okay? We have a church, I won't say where it is. But if by chance, whatever the church might need financially, he might still call us colored. Yeah, because some of our older folk, they haven't grown in their language, okay? But they know that when there's a need, that they can go to Mr. Smith at the bank and get what the church needs and get it at a term far better than you could get. All right? You know, then we look at, a lot of us, I think y'all got books of order and books of worship and books of discipline. They've learned we do what works. Yeah. You may not necessarily have to hold a particular title in rural spaces to be effective. Yes. Yes. We had in Lexington, Kentucky, a woman, you never got to meet her, but you would have loved her. She was 95 years old when she died. In addition, she was the church treasurer for like 40 years. And every Sunday, she would take the offering, and unless somebody drove her, she would walk it to the bank to deposit it. But if the church had a financial need that they didn't have, that same woman who didn't have a lot of education and worked caring for a white family's kids that they only paid her $25 a week for 50 years, could on her face alone walk in to the church's bank and borrow any amount of money for the church and get it. Because they knew they could trust her to make sure that it would get paid back. Yes. Huh? She got it done. Yes. And the worst thing you could have done for somebody like that, yes, or look at paper qualifications to determine who is suitable to get things done. And be as open. One thing I learned in that space, they like my family too. The rural spaces are the only ones who gave my children Christmas gifts. Urban spaces didn't do that. But rural spaces did. They celebrated birthdays. They even came to my graduation. They all rolled here. Yes. And so again, we want to touch a little bit about, especially since we're talking about the black church context. The black church is, in some ways, in rural spaces, appear to be not as, what's that term we use now, woke? Yes. But a lot of that has to depend with the economics of where they live. Okay. And no matter how much you may want them to march and to protest and to hashtag, the reality of it is, when you go home, they still have to live in those spaces. Yes. Yes. They still have to live there. and they still have to interact with the others in that community as best as they can. Because since rural spaces are smaller, everything comes out more pronounced than it does in our urban spaces. Anybody have any questions about what we've shared so far? Or comments, or observations, or experiences? Yes, sir.
Just a few observations. One of the biggest mistakes that any clergy person can make when they go to an assignment, whether it be rural or urban, is how much is the pastor salary? And then when you talk, business meetings or there's nothing better than understanding during the interim of the business meeting, officers, y'all got the discretion to use your judgment just as a courtesy, inform me. I don't care if y'all buy toilet paper, just and confer with the pastor. And then historically in the rural church, my folk were sharecroppers and so forth. So the money came in once a year. Okay. A lot of churches in rural depended upon homecoming.
Yes, special days.
And all women,
yes. And for the black, for those, for our white brothers and sisters, special days, church anniversary, homecoming, missionary day, women's day, men's day. Those are, yes, they're not just for food and fellowship. They're also to raise funds. Because we don't have people who leave us endowments when they die. Even if they have a lot of money, they don't leave endowments and bequests and the other financial terms of making sure that the church that they love, and it's not about their lack of love. A lot of us just haven't been taught these things. Okay? So we depend on those special events in order to raise the needed funds to keep the work of the church going.
Right.
And if someone does die, we haven't even taught leaving the church in their wills or in their insurance policies. Once the descendants and the survivors fight over whatever is there, you might get $100 gift for the building fund or the children's ministry.
And in terms of leadership, that gets in the hearts of the people. I said, now look, I'm not against flowers, but Sister Jones and them don't need no flowers. We just, give them a donation, make the check feel with the funeral. As a pastor, I don't send flowers, but I will take out my checkbook and make a memorial gift to the church. And the last thing is, I guess probably for the last 15 years, I said, now look, $150,000 life insurance policy, I pay the premiums. 50% is going to whatever church I pastor.
All right.
The other is going to my wife.
All right.
But what I'm trying to do is say, now, if you can't do what I do, at least think in terms of leaving the church 10,000 at your death and so forth. Because we want the church to continue on after I'm gone. But that goes back to leadership. Now the other side of it, you may walk into a situation where there's been somebody corrupt before you.
Yes. Yes. We always have to pay for their sins, don't we?
Yeah.
Anybody over there? All right, we are looking at continuing this theme in 2020. Yay. So we want to know, what would you like for us as the Black Church Studies Consultation? Is there something you've heard this time that you want us to expand further on? Or is there something we didn't touch on this day that you might want us to consider?
I think it would be good, maybe for my situation, being an African American church in a white, predominantly, a majority denomination.
Okay.
There are certain things, depending on the system that you're working in, that there are some inequities in there
Yes.
that are really not addressed. And the understanding from tall steeple type institution churches, I don't think they get the difference between that and urban ministry or that and small church ministry. It's all, as they say, nickels and noses or whatever you say.
Okay.
And there's still a lot of ministry that is done, and we know how to do it on a shoestring. So, you know, and those type of things, I think just raising that awareness that there are some issues within mainline denominations with churches of color.
Okay, which is a whole different topic altogether. But we will.
Still African American church.
Yeah, but we're talking about specifically the rural context. Yes. I know as I stepped into Angela's that the community organizing piece is going to require a lot more fleshing out to get done. But what else that you may have heard today that you'd like us to expand on further, or something related to rural church? I know when we sent out a survey, who got the survey? We sent out a survey to some about what you would like to see discussed. And I know we only got about 9 responses back. But out of those 9 responses, the majority were talking about money matters. Yes, related to rural industry.
Yeah, I was going to go there. I was going to say,
Yeah.
Perhaps in 2020, if we can have resources or help rural churches find some resources to help them.
Yes.
Financially or whatever.
Okay.
I know there's grants out there, but if
Yes,
we can
and that's what we'll be researching during this year, yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, we'll be working on resources and researching that as a possible presentation,
So I was
yes.
going to say, as a urban ministry, at least in my context, what I found is a lot of the rural ministries depend on me.
Yes.
And I'm having my struggles in my urban.
In your own context, right.
And so trying to support my church and several other,
Yes.
it's becoming more increasingly difficult.
Because we get all the letters.
Absolutely.
So when you've got however many churches in your, however you call your judicatory, you're going to get letters because everybody is counting on a $100 full page ad from the big churches. Yes. And even if you're looking to reciprocate, they may only do a patron or a quarter page. Forgetting, that same 100 we sent you, it helps us if you send that 100. Yes. Yes. And in some spaces, the urban churches have more difficult financial struggles than in the rural spaces. Yes. Yes. My granddaughter in Mississippi, they live in a really rural space, McCarland, Mississippi. But they built a whole brand new church out in the country. Yes.
I think I was going to say too, I don't know who all you invited, but I hear a lot of pastors. And my thought is this also might be good for more laity to come to as well. In the CME church in particular,
Yeah.
my position.
This consultation was earmarked mainly for church clergy leaders.
Well,
Yes.
I was just going to say, my position as joint board finance chair, when I'm trying to get monies from smaller churches, or rural churches, it's best that I call the steward chair.
Yes.
Versus the pastor.
Yes.
Because that's what the leadership is.
Right.
So perhaps even having some classes or forum where the lay can come.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be a great help to some of our rural
Yes.
churches.
Okay.
So they can
Make
build
sure
that,
that-
they can build that leadership up from both sides, clergy
Yes.
and
Yeah, because when we looked at who we wanted to target, or who we wanted our target audience to be, we talked about the student population, because we don't want to ever do anything here without including our students, as well as we were aiming like for pastors and those who supervise pastors to be here as well. That's who we earmarked, and we looked at a geographical area of like as far south as Nashville, as far north. First we thought Cincinnati or Columbus, Ohio, and we wanted to go as far west to St. Louis and east somewhere. But I think east was Columbus. But we had a challenge because a lot of our churches and regions don't have a sufficient online directory type presence for us to, we were trying to develop a database, and then as we developed the database, we realized that a lot of the spaces didn't have email addresses or cell phone contacts. Some rural churches don't have a phone on site
Right.
at all.
Because everybody's
got a cell phone. And they definitely don't have web pages and email addresses. So yeah, we looked at how to get the most to get what we got. But yes, we will make sure that we include our laity. Yeah. But we still have the same problem. If we send it to the church, it may sit on somebody's desk until 3 months after the event. Oh, we were supposed to do that. Yes. Huh?
Just a suggestion, people of the mega churches, I am not afraid of the mega church because they're going to have problems in succession.
I would say that too.
No, that is happening.
Yes.
But in the Methodist church, I think we still have class groups or small groups.
Well, some of
class
leaders
right.
in the classes, yes.
That's one of the worst things we could have gotten rid of or abandoned, the significance of small groups, empowering people and so forth. The other thing, I got tickled on the same thing. Sometimes it's best not to hear those who train preachers. I'm not talking about you, but they have not adapted to some things. And you're talking about the influence of media or whatever. Well, think that through, because each one of you can do something by way of YouTube. Hello? A broadcast. And you can have internet radio. I'm not talking about receiving, but you can broadcast churches. Now, within the AME Zion Church and the CME Church, and I know the AME Church is better than the our church media can do things that Fox is not doing and the local community. So are we effectively using all the persons that are editors? Are they really in touch with what our congregations need?
Yes.
And I There's a friend of mine, he's black, and he has pastored a solely white congregation for 8 years. And when he took leadership, they said it ain't gonna work. Okay. Now, I can learn from him. Now, I preached before, white congregations and revival stuff like that. But I don't know what it's like to pastor a completely.
Yes.
And vice versa. Maybe some of you pastor of that congregation or a mixed congregation. So we're living in an age now. I want some folks to speak Spanish in my congregation.
All right.
And read me because I'm going off the scene.
Okay.
And in one church, if I hear 4 funerals, I'm dead in the water.
Yeah.
The other church, the oldest member is 96, and the other 4 are approaching 80, and there's one fellow that's below 40. So when those persons are stricken with illness,
Yes.
where is the church going to be?
That's right.
And there's no likelihood of growth.
Yes.
So do we need to look at pooling resources, consolidating, or do we? There's a difference between a grape and a raisin.
Yes. Thank you. And lastly, since we mentioned that, wherever you find yourself, always still give your best preaching. Don't water it. Don't dilute it. Give them the same attention that you have devoted to study and sermon preparation and Bible study teaching as you would in an urban or a large church context. Every church, whether there are 2 or 2,000, deserve a quality, capable, committed, dedicated pastor. One of my bishops once said to us, and I will close with that, and we'll get ready to go across the hall. He said, often what the church, and the institutional church especially, requires of us to do in congregational spaces clashes with what we say God has called us to do and be. When you find yourself in that crisis, do first what God has called you to do. Amen. And once you do what God has called you to do, God will help guide you through what the institution requires of you to do. And so those things that start weighing on our shoulders, the burden, I feel better, so much better, when I lay that burden down. Thank you all. Let us move across to the hall. Huntley for our closing. And thank you for sharing with us today and last night. And for those who are traveling to Pittsburgh and Tennessee and all them places, safe travel. On your way back home.
Oh, me? For you, 70 miles below.
Okay. All right. That's fast.
Yeah. Okay. But see, you two,